Down those doors, and we want to welcome our first panel. I have an opening statement which I'll read in part and hopefully get unanimous consent to submit all for the record. But I've been thinking about CFATs for a long time, since the last hearing and how long it's taken and the past problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We all know the story. You know, the Illinois state flag has a banner underneath that says state sovereignty, national unity. And I think part of our debate is here at the national level, our state's still sovereign, and how do we address national unity issues like Homeland Security and the like. And I think this is a perfect program that, if done properly, we can move in a direction. What do we need on security? Many of you know I have a military background, served in West Germany during the old days, understand security, understand perimeters, understand threats, not as well as those who are involved more deeply today. But we want folks to have perimeter security. We would like the national government to provide assistance in identifying insecure facilities or placement of chemicals and operations and stuff. As I said, assistance. Not the threats, not the mandates, and then we do need to address the personal assurance issues about who's involved and working around what type of materials. I think that really encompasses my view of CFATs. How can we work together so that we're all better off? I think we still got a ways to go. I know we're making progress since the last hearing, but I think there's still issues to address. And I know that there's some issues about why today, and was this planned, and was there politics behind today? At least that's what the rumors were from staff. And first of all, I said, no, we're just last full week here. We've got to get through this. But the second point, I said, well, how do you best honor those on a day like today than to address threats of today? I think we do more if we're really concerned about the threats posed to continue to address our issues of safety and security on today. I think that's how you better honor folks by moving forward. So whatever debates and statements on that is, I don't really have a dog in that fight, and I could really care less if what people think on that. After the last hearing on this issue, I know testimony is going to be that we've implemented, or DHS has implemented 59 of its 95 corrective actions. We'll want to ask where are we at on the other 36. I'll address questions on the permanent branch chiefs. I do think having people in positions for a period of time is probably an important thing for continuity and for a process. I have a national forest in my congressional district. My relationships with the manager and the forest and all the stakeholders are much better when the same person's there over a couple years versus swapping them out every 6 months or every year. And I think that's true probably in any federal agency. My staffers who deal with constituent service are much better having continued to do that work over years versus having them doing different things. We need to also address how do we move forward in a more transparent, open system and process. I think that's issues also of the last hearing. So I look forward to the hearing. I think it's very, very important. Just for my colleagues who have shown up, Mr. Beers has agreed to waive his opening statement so that we can move questions after we get through ours because of the time constraints with the ceremony and your early departure, and we appreciate that. So with that, I'm going to yield back the balance of my time and yield to the ranking member, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing today, and I don't know if it's special timing, but I think it's the reason we have chemical security is because of 9/11 and the concern we have about our major industrial facilities. I want to welcome both our panels. This is an important issue. I'm glad to see our subcommittee continue oversight of this critical program. I represent the Houston Ship Channel area, which is the largest petrochemical complex in the country. I kind of stress how important the success of the CFATS program is to my constituents who are the employees and live in the communities that surround the facilities. They deserve the best security standards possible to prevent acts of terrorism on U.S. soil. Secretary Beers, you did not testify under the best circumstances last February, but I hear that you have some positive things to report this time around, and I appreciate that things are starting to move, but we cannot ignore that it's been 6 years since this program was enacted, and we're still not close to being there yet. It's time to get these plants inspected and approved, and I hope that you have a deadline for doing so to report to us this morning. That said, it's Congress' job to make sure you have the resources to do this. I understand that the House Appropriators significantly cut your budget. With movement finally happening in the last few months, now is not the time to limit resources, and I encourage my colleagues not to set us back now. I want to end by talking about a subject that's of prime importance to me, and that's personal surety. Developing and implementing a personal surety program that relies on existing government credential systems like the TWIC would reduce the burden on DHS and the workers at these facilities and the industry. Secretary Beers, last year I asked if the department intended to integrate TWIC into the personal security program. You gave me a positive response, and yet the proposal you sent to the OMB did not make it clear that TWIC is an acceptable background check. I'm pleased that you rescinded the proposal in July, but understand that you will resubmit a revised personal security proposal in the coming months. I hope today that you'll definitely commit to allowing the Transport Worker Identification Card, or TWIC, to be used without caveats for workers or industries. We will soon be reissuing thousands and thousands of TWIC cards because they're expiring, including mine expires in June of next year. I spend so much time on plant sites in my district. At the Port of Houston, we have over 250,000 employees who use a TWIC card every day to get to work. 250,000, multiply that across the country. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. We need to fix TWIC and use it as a standard card. I regret Congress has still not passed a CFATS authorization. I still believe that a lot of progress by CFATS program stems directly from not having a permanent authorization with direction from Congress. Chemical facility security is extremely important to protection of public health and safety throughout the U.S., particularly in our congressional district. There's no reason we should not act on this issue, and I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair recognizes the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Upton, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask that my full statement be made part of the record. And
Without objection.
I just want to say that 6 months ago we authorized CFATS. We were very conscious that the next terrorism incursion could come from within a chemical plant instead of onboard an airplane. And those of us that were here in D.C. 11 years ago remember well every single minute of that day. And I, for one, made a promise that we should do everything that we can to make sure that that moment doesn't occur again in this nation. We got to honor the victims and their loved ones by working together to ensure that such an attack can never happen again. And I support Chairman Shimkus and all that he's doing on this to make sure that, in fact, we are better safeguarded as a nation, and I yield back my time. Mr.
Okay, gentleman yields back his time. With that, seeing no other members here or authorized for an opening statement, the chair now recognizes himself. First of all, as stated earlier, both Mr. Beers and Ms. Barrick both have agreed to waive their opening statements, so we can go right to questions. We appreciate that. And so I will start. Mr. Beers, it's my understanding from your website that you got one facility that is approved under the program. And of that one, what is its plan on personal assurance?
Sir, we have now two plans that have been approved. Those approvals are conditional pending the completion of the response to risk-based performance standard 12, which is the personal surety standard. So we are working actively now to reintroduce the request to OMB for the collection program that we need to move forward. But let me say three things about that.
Quickly.
First, we will, Chairman, Ranking Member Green, TWIC will be included in that. We will also have the opportunity for entire companies and service providers to be able to submit for their entire companies, and they'll be authorized to go to any plant that they go to that's covered by this program. And thirdly, we are going to work this program heavily with industry to make sure that we move as quickly as possible, but recognizing their needs as well.
And you understand my concern if we've got two that have approved and we still don't have the personal assurance issue. It's hard for me to understand how we say it's conditionally approved without the whole ball game, a standard being reached across the board. I know we want to send positive signals, but we don't want to send false signals either, that we're better off and we have a full program in. Do you want to respond, Mr. Beard?
Sir, I totally agree with you that we don't want to leave any security requirement not fulfilled. But it was our view that the conditional authorization process, because of the slowness with which we were getting the necessary personal surety questions answered, meant that we believe that we ought to move forward with the conditional authorization and catch up as quickly as possible with the personal surety.
Okay, let me go move to the last hearing. We also had an issue because all facilities were placed into the same tier, so we had a big debate about how do we get risk tiering and what's the methodology, and let's make sure we have the proper people doing that. And my understanding is risk tiering is a formula. Is that correct? We have a formula to do that. And what comprises of the formula?
Sir, there are a series of factors that are involved in that formula. First of all,
we have to go quickly. How
how
about if I just help out here? Threat times vulnerability times consequence is the risk factor, correct?
That's the essential equation, and then each of those elements has sub-elements within it.
So let me ask about how do you, I don't claim to be a great mathematician, but I understand formulas, I understand constants, and I understand variables. One of our concerns is that vulnerability you have as a constant versus a variable, and that concerns us in the formula. In fact, I would like to go to the GAO, and did you know that in this formula that for that issue of vulnerability, that vulnerability is listed as a constant, not a variable?
We do know that, Chairman, and are looking at that right now. I think the specifics of this are for official use only, but to talk about this at an unclassified level, we found a similar, we look at how DHS calculates risk scores across the department as a part of a number of our reviews. We found a similar problem in how they calculate risk for a major grant program, and in fact recommended that they not hold vulnerability constant. DHS implemented that recommendation in the last grant cycle and varied it. So we have cited that as a concern in past work.
And the point being, two similar facilities, one in downtown Manhattan, one outside Olney, Illinois, two very different risk portfolios. And so that's why we would argue there should be a variable aspect on that formula. And on the last time, how do you move a facility through the site security process, approve SSPs, inspect, et cetera, when there is no personal surety plan that assures the facility managers that no one in the plant is on the terrorist watch list? It's kind of going back to the previous question.
Sir, there is more to the site security plan than simply the individuals involved, which is not to say that that's not a very significant and important part. So the question is, what are the other security provisions within the plan that we and they can record and review and inspect?
Yeah, thank you. My time has expired, and because I want to keep this going, and I appreciate that response. I would just say that in chemical facilities, probably the biggest threat would be someone internally being able to get inside the facility and know the facility. So of all the threats, that's probably the biggest one I would venture to guess. So with that, I would yield to the ranking member, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Beers, as of 2 days ago, the Tier 1 site plans reviewed or authorized were 73 and 2. that were approved. What does conditionally authorized mean? Does that mean they can continue to operate, or is there?
That means that they can move forward with implementation of the site security plan elements that were approved. Okay. And that we come back when we have a personal surety program that we have agreed on and implement those. But let me just make one point with respect to personal surety. It is not that this government has been quiet or inattentive to looking at insider threats within this area. FBI, which we work in partnership with, has a very robust program of looking for threats within the country and ensuring that they're being inspected. This program would be an additional program to the excellent work that the FBI is doing on a daily basis.
How long does it take to get a plan from conditionally approved to approved?
That's going to depend, sir, on when the personal surety risk-based performance standards, when we agree on what the standards are that they're supposed to meet. Right now, we're looking at publishing the request for information in the next 30 days and collecting that information over a 60-day period, and then going forward with our proposal to OMB.
You mentioned that as of July the 16th in your statement, ISCD has resumed authorization inspections on Tier 1 facilities. How many inspections on the average are you conducting a month?
David, you want to answer that question?
We have a total of...
Check and make sure your microphone's on, and pull it close if you can.
Absolutely. We have about 10 inspections scheduled during the month of September. We anticipate continuing to increase the pace of inspections going forward. So I think you will see hundreds of inspections occurring over the course of the next year.
Okay. At that rate, how long do you think it'll take to get to all those sites that are awaiting inspection? A year?
Well, the sites that are awaiting inspection are those that have received their authorization. And right now those are 73 sites. Those will all several of those have already been inspected. We've conducted a total of 19 authorization inspections to this point. The remainder of those 73 and additional ones that we anticipate authorizing over the next months will certainly be inspected in the next year.
And I would hope folks are moving into the conditional authorization, so that group will be expanding, I assume.
The numbers of finally approved SSPs will certainly be continuing to grow.
Given the current status of the SSP tool, has DHS explored how to better use the authority to use alternative security plans to help expedite the CFATS approval process?
Yes, sir. That's an important element of our efforts. We have been working with the American Chemical Council. We've run a pilot program with an alternative security plan with them and are hoping to issue some guidance for the members of that council to be able to use the alternative security plan. We are also working with agricultural industries looking at the same possibility.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you being willing to use similar credential programs like TWIC. Federal government really doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. TWIC is not perfect, believe me, and I've learned when it was rolled out, and we'll see as we do the reissuing them. But we need to learn from that and have one ID, whether you're on water side or on land side, your facility. The internal DHS memo leaked to the press last year articulated programmatic breakdowns, serious deficiencies. What is the timeline for the full implementation of the 91 recommendations for improving the CFATS program?
Sir, with respect to all 95 now of those, some of them are going to go on over a longer period of time, but we're moving as quickly as possible. We were, since we submitted the testimony, with the written testimony with the September 4 deadline, increased the number of items that have been completed. And David, I don't want to speak to the precise number, but when would you say we would be up in the 80s?
I would say we'll be in the 80s by the end of the calendar year, most likely.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm out of time, and I have one question on site security plan I'd like to submit and share the answer, and I appreciate y'all getting back to us.
Thank you. Without objection. The chair recognizes the vice chair of the subcommittee, Mr. Murphy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses today. I just want to verify, so the number of site security plans that's been approved is 2.
2, sir.
You got the funding in 2006 to go forward on this, am I correct?
Excuse
The
me?
funding came forth to start these inspections in 2006? Is that correct? 2007, it was a few years ago?
I don't know whether it came forward in the authorization occurred then,
Authorization, okay.
but we've not been in a position to actually finally approve them really until this summer, in part because of the management problems that have been revealed, and in part because as we have gone forward with the program, we've learned a whole lot, and the whole lot that we've learned has also created the appreciation that it was more complicated than it was originally thought to be at the beginning of the program.
So how long have you been getting the money, and how much money is it you've been receiving to do this then?
I believe the total. I believe the total amount of money that we've received is slightly under $500 million. David is.
Yeah, I think in the order of 450 million.
Wow. And we still have, what, over 4,000 plans to review?
We have about 4,400 plans to review. We have 4,433 facilities that have been designated or have preliminary designations as being in the high-risk category.
So, I mean, we hope this goes better, because otherwise you're at the rate of approving them all within a few centuries, and we wanted to help you speed that up. You had said that the inspectors weren't well trained and there was a number of problems. How many inspectors are trained now?
All the inspectors that we have, the number is over 100. 114, I believe, is the actual number, and that training about doing the inspections was completed during the month of July.
And they're all qualified to do the inspections?
Yes, sir.
How many inspectors are needed to do each plan?
We have a planned workforce that's in, David, about 120 something overall.
Yes, yeah, we do, and that will encompass ammonium nitrate inspections when that program comes.
But I mean,
comes
how many
online.
people do you need each time if we're doing each one?
It varies depending on the size and scope of the facility, but I'd say anywhere from 2 to 3, 4, 5.
So I'm still looking here at you've got about $2 million per person there to do this, and you need 2 or 3 to do each one. Using those kind of numbers and those figures, when do you anticipate you'll even reach the halfway point with these inspections?
We anticipate within the next year that we will have authorized, conducted inspections, and if all goes well with the site security plans, we'll have approved close to 300 plans.
But that still leaves us 3,500 or so to do, and that's. Yeah. I mean, I know you're concerned, and we are too. I'm trying to find ways we can help you.
Would the gentleman yield for 1 second?
Yes.
What I would weigh in is that's why we need to properly tier the facilities. And that's why this debate that's going on about alternative security plans are very, very important, so that
Yes.
we use the plans that are already established out there in the industry, which are trying to do the same thing for the most part, and work together versus against each other.
No, I don't want. I want to work together. I'm just trying to find out if there's specific recommendations of things you need from us to facilitate that in moving forward. Because we know you want to be accurate. We know you want to do this in a way that protects public safety and works with the things that industry has found. And so I'm wondering, as a process going through, are you finding ways in this that, in addition to the people that you have approved for the inspections, that those, which the chairman was mentioning within the industry, can facilitate that and actually speed up this process in a way that helps too? Is there something we can learn from that?
Sir, that is in large measure what we're about right now, which is to ensure that the people are trained, to ensure that the review process to get the plans to the authorization stage so that we can send out the inspectors to do that moves more quickly and more efficiently than it has in the past. And I think that the record since the review process to make the internal reviews go faster has shown an increase. I think that the inspection plan training has increased the number of inspections. So I think we're moving at a rate that is going to be increasing. But I have to say here, sir, it will not help us if the House Appropriations Committee appropriation level for this program, which cuts $40 million.
Well, I might add, I mean, I know oftentimes when I'm visiting businesses, they're very concerned that government seems to come in, work against them, doesn't ask them for their assistance. And I would like to echo what the chairman said, that, I mean, these are people who also care about their communities, their families, their workers, and I hope you do talk with them and see what you can learn from so many of these companies, because they do want to facilitate and move this forward. And I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time. It's tough to argue dollars and cents when we have a track record of millions of dollars per individual. So I wouldn't go down that route, Mr. Beers. The chair would now recognize my colleague from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield, for 5 minutes.
Let me thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and certainly thank the three witnesses for coming forward today with your testimony. I'm going to not take up the entire 5 minutes, but I do want to ask Secretary Beers and possibly Mr. Wolf a very short question. I'm told that the department has a hotline for whistleblowers. That's what my staff tells me, that there is now in place a hotline for whistleblowers, and that anyone can call that hotline with security concerns. Department employees have whistleblower protections, but what protections, if any, cover facility employees and even the general public? Mr. Beers, can you help me with that?
I'm going to turn to David to answer the question about the hotline, but it's certainly our view that we solicit both from within the Department of Homeland Security and from the private sector and from citizens any indication of issues that we ought to pay attention to. The protection involved there will be, we will provide anonymity if anonymity is requested. That's a basic policy of hotlines if that's what the person wants. So if it's from an employee of the company, we will keep that.
What about downstream at the facilities?
Yes.
Yeah, same thing with the facilities?
Yes. I mean, insofar as they tell us, we're not going to reveal the names of the individuals who gave us that information if they want their identity protected.
And the same with the general public?
And the same for the general public, yes, sir.
All right.
Yeah, and we do maintain, as the Undersecretary noted, a tip line, a CFATS-focused tip line. So members of the public, facility personnel can call in and report concerns, can report information about facilities that may benefit from being part of the CFATS program.
All right. More than 2,700 facilities have eliminated or reduced holdings of dangerous chemicals, so they are no longer considered high-risk facilities. How does DHS ensure those facilities do not increase the amount of those chemicals in their inventory at a later date? Yeah. David?
Yeah, well, those facilities, and if I can mention, that is one of the many successes that we view up in the CFATS program to this point, and there is a pretty significant list of things that America has received for its investment in CFATS. But with regard to those facilities, having been part of the program, having gone through the initial top screen, they are made aware of their obligation when they bring into the facility chemicals above the screening threshold quantity that are on the list of 322 chemicals of interest, their obligation to report that to us. So they're fully aware of that and meet those obligations. So facilities come back into the program as well.
Okay, now to the Managing Director. Department of Homeland Security Infrastructure Security Compliance Division completed 21 of 94 items from its action plan between June and September of this year. And prior to that, the department had only completed 38 items. Is DHS now completing the 94-item action plan at a faster rate than the GAO anticipated?
I think they're making good progress on the action plan. They demonstrated their commitment. They're actively tracking it. We had some suggestions to provide some additional details in the plan, which they've incorporated. The one thing I would mention about the action plan, I think it's a very good first step. Excuse me. However, to address these issues that were highlighted in the management memo is going to take leadership, sustained leadership support over the long term. Some of these action plans are designed to develop plans to, implement a program. For example, a framework to create a quality division. While that's very important, the actual execution of this quality division, how they oversee this process, is really what's going to be critical. So we think it's a very good first step, but it's going to require long-term, and sustained leadership support to refine these actions, update them as needed, and make sure that they execute on the plans that they've put in place.
All right, and I'll end where I began with Mr. Beers or either Mr. Wolf. You mentioned that 73 facilities have authorized or conditionally authorized Tier 1 security plans. Are there any additional steps those facilities must complete before inspection and approval?
No, sir. That means that they're ready for inspection. The ones that haven't been getting authorized or conditionally authorized either need to provide more data, or we need to have a better understanding of what the data that
do the steps vary across facilities?
Excuse me?
Do the steps vary, the final steps vary across the different facilities?
Well, no facility is necessarily the same, so what they need to do in order to meet the risk-based performance standards may be different for each facility, which means that there's no automatic template when you look at a response that either it's yes or no. You got to look at what they actually said with respect to that particular performance standard and make sure that it matches what the performance standard lays out as
Gentleman's time's expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Gardner, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. Mr. Beers, I want to ask a couple of questions to follow up on a committee hearing we had February 3rd, 2012. I'm going to read the transcript from about 30 seconds worth of our conversation. I started the conversation by asking about the Anderson-Wolf memorandum and said, Mr. Gardner, so the Inspector General has looked into this, and your response was, the Inspector General has access to these reports. Yes, sir, but this was not done by, and I stated, have you had conversations with the Inspector General? Mr. Beers, with respect to this report, yes. Mr. Beers, I can't speak to that. I have not personally had that conversation. And I followed up with, but he has this memorandum. Your response to that was, as with all these kinds of reports, yes, they are available. They are available, or he has them. I mean, you've sent it to him. Your response was, I will have to confirm that, sir. And so, Mr. Beers, I just follow up with that. You never did get back to me or to the committee to confirm that you had given the Anderson memo to the Inspector General, did you?
Yes, sir.
You got back to us.
I'm sorry. I'm not certain that we got back to you, but yes, they have it.
Okay, but you, I don't think you got back to me. I certainly never received the information. You didn't get back to this committee. But it was after this committee hearing. It was after the February 3rd committee hearing when the Inspector General had watched the broadcast of our interaction. And it was more than a month after it was all over the national news and 2 months after you received the memorandum that the IG called you to obtain the memorandum. Is that correct?
We had a conversation immediately after this hearing, yes, sir.
And when did he get the report then?
I can't tell you the specific day on which he got it.
It was 2 months after the conversation. And again, you didn't give it to him right away after the committee hearing. After that conversation, did you give it to him right away? Surely you remember that.
I did not personally give it to him. I asked my staff that it be given to him immediately per the conversation that he and I had.
And staff was directed to immediately give it to him?
Yes, sir.
And the memorandum, though, didn't go out until May. Is that correct?
Sir, I don't have that information.
Do you have staff here that could answer that?
David? I don't believe I could answer that, sir.
And so here's the problem that I have, and that's why I would ask you for the full story here. How many times have you ever communicated with either Richard Skinner or Charles Edwards in their respective positions as Inspector General at DHS or the Acting Inspector General, or anyone else from the DHS Inspector General Office about the CFATS program?
I have talked to Mr. Edwards on at least, I want to say, I am positive that I have spoken to him on at least 3 occasions, and I could have had other conversations with him beyond that, but I don't.
And are those conversations started by you, or were they initiated by, who initiated those conversations?
In one case, it was him. In the other cases, it was me.
And so have you discussed, the conduct of an audit, inspection, or investigation of the CFATS program? Was that the purpose of the conversation?
We had a conversation about that, yes.
And that was a conversation that you started or that they started?
I believe that was one that I started.
And have you anyone in NPPD, IP, or ISCD ever suggested that the Homeland Security Inspector General come in and look at the problems being encountered by CFATS?
Sir, as a result of that round of hearings, a member of Congress requested the IG to come in and look at it.
But you never?
When he and I had the conversation about the management report, I did not request that he come in and look at it, but I certainly said we are open to anything that you believe is appropriate to looking at this program.
And so the recommendations so nobody in NPPD, IP, or ISCD ever suggested that? To come in and look at the problems being encountered by CFATS. That was all a member of Congress that suggested that.
There was a discussion in the fall of 2010 as to whether or not the Inspector General should be invited to conduct a management review, which would have required us to pay them to hire an outside consultant to conduct that review. When we looked at this...
And that was a suggestion that they had made?
Excuse me?
That was a suggestion that somebody in one of these...
That is a suggestion that Assistant Secretary Todd Kyle made in a memo.
And so what did you do with that recommendation?
Excuse me?
What did you do with that recommendation?
We sat down in senior leadership, including Assistant Secretary Kyle, and decided that we could perform that particular review with an Office of Compliance and Security, which exists within NPPD but not within IP, and that we could do it more quickly and we could do it without an additional cost to the program. And that report was done and delivered in September of 2011 and became part of the management review that Penny Anderson and David Wolf undertook. The results are in that effort.
Yeah, so just to follow up, with this most recent February 3rd hearing, the revelations in the Anderson-Wolf memo, though, did anyone, I'll follow up again, did anyone in NPPD, IP, or ISCD ever suggest to you that DHS, IG, come in and look at the problems being encountered?
After that hearing, no.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, Mr. Barrow, would you seek recognition? Chair now recognizes gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for coming in today to testify again before the committee. Mr. Beers, let me ask, could you inform us of the misuse of government-owned vehicles by the Washington-based headquarters personnel?
I'm sorry, sir, could you...
Could you inform us about any misuse of government-owned vehicles by Washington-based headquarters personnel?
Sir, I do not have an indication of that kind of misuse. We did look at that issue. David, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, there were, before Ms. Anderson and I came into the division, vehicles that were housed at our headquarters location. Before we arrived, those vehicles had been removed. So we didn't have any indication that the vehicles had been misused. But we believed it was that their presence at headquarters was not necessary for the.
Okay, when you say removed, could you explain when you say removed? Were they moved to another government agency? What happened to them?
I believe, and I wasn't there at the time, that they were pushed out to our field force.
Okay, but were the records kept on those vehicles prior to that time as to where they were or where they were going, like mileage records, odometer statements, gas records, et cetera?
I don't know that.
Is there a way to get those records?
Sir, I want to acknowledge that's one of the management problems that we discovered, that there was inadequate record keeping, and that's one of the deficiencies that we have corrected.
Okay, but I think what we need to have in the committee, though, is we should have the, you know, if we could request that information, and have to go back and find those records, because again, it would seem to me that if it's a government vehicle, and when you have those government vehicles out there, that, you know, you got the odometer statements, and also there'd be, you know, there'd be gas records and things like that, that they'd have to be filled up, they'd have to have some service, they'd have to have different records out there. So I think it's very, very important for the committee to get that information from you all, so we could start with that point as to know exactly where those vehicles were and if they were misused. So that's one of the things we'd like to do that. And let me ask, just to follow up again, maybe you just mentioned it. When did you all become aware of that problem with those vehicles? When you said you came in and those vehicles were removed, when were you all aware of it?
Fill in if I'm not precise on this, but my understanding is that came out in the management review that was done by our Office of Compliance and Security. So the detail about the lack of records and oversight was finally reported in September of 2011, made available to David and Penny Anderson for incorporation in their report.
Let me ask, was any of this turned over to the IG for investigation?
No, sir, that was not turned over to the IG. The report itself said that there was a lack of record keeping, but that there was not an indication of waste, fraud, and abuse associated with that. Not an indication, not saying that it wasn't, but it was not indicated.
Okay, and again, how many vehicles are we talking about in total?
Yeah, I would have to get that back to you.
Could we get that back from you then? We'd appreciate that information.
Relatively small number, I believe. Four to six vehicles.
That's what my staff is telling me, 4 to 6 vehicles.
Okay. And Undersecretary, you were aware of the unsatisfactory condition of the SSP process before you testified back in March of last year in 12. Is that correct, that you were aware of that?
I was aware that we were not moving at a pace that we had previously told you we should be moving at. Yes, sir. And I indicated that I was disappointed in that and that I had hoped that we would move more rapidly on that.
Okay, and I'm sorry, did you say that you brought those problems and that information to the committee at that time?
Sir, which hearing are we talking about now?
The March 2011 or the February 2012 hearing?
So at the March 2011 hearing, I believe I acknowledged that we had not achieved the objectives of getting the site security plans authorized at the rate that I had previously been told we would complete those plans. And that I had hoped, and I'm now talking 2011, that we would be in a position to move forward on that. That was a unfortunately not accurate statement at that time either.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time's expired.
My time's expired, and I yield back.
I would encourage my colleagues who want to go to the memorial service to head on down to the rotunda. We're going to finish with Mr. Cassidy for 5 minutes, and then we'll close. We'll tell how we're going to operate after that. So, gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 5 minutes.
Gentlemen, I have a lot of petrochemical in my plant, in my state. My workers, my communities are at risk, and I have to say that when I speak of dysfunction in Washington, y'all are case number one. I say that not to be mean, but just to kind of observe. In the report that was the internal report that kind of broke this open, there are statements such as legacy employees are doing a tremendous amount of work while they see others sitting at their desks not contributing. Those folks who are not contributing, are they still with the agency or have they been released?
David, would you answer that?
Yeah, we've made a concerted effort to ensure that all members of our team are contributing to the program, and part of what we've done as we've moved forward to kind of toward a realignment of the organization is to ensure that we have can achieve a greater fit between the individual employees and the position in which.
Have any been released? Because the document suggested that some that were hired were totally inappropriately, had skill sets and attitudes that were totally inappropriate to their job description, making it sound more as not something that required some adjustment, that required, frankly, rehiring. Has anybody been released?
No one's been released, but, you know.
Can I just keep on going then? They're also, in that same report, said that not only had you not done any inspections, you had not developed a process to inspect. An incredible indictment. Are we to believe that you now have a process to inspect?
Yes, sir. We have retrained all of the inspectors that are currently on board. We completed that process in July.
Now, I'm sorry, just because we have limited time, I apologize to interrupt. It also said that because of your union contracts and your necessity to bargain even on minutia, even on things that to bring you in compliance with government policy, that it was anticipated that this could take weeks, months, implied years in order to actually implement the policy changes necessary to do an effective inspection. What's happened with that?
Sir, we have worked with the unions, and I think we have a productive and expedited process to have those items that are required to be reviewed by the union so that they move swiftly. But I want to turn to David, who's been managing this on a day-to-day.
Yeah, and you know, if I could just add, sir, that the point that was we're trying to make in the challenges memo was that at the early stage in which this program found itself, the presence of a union added an additional layer of complexity. But you know, I'm glad to report that we have developed a very strong relationship with our bargaining unit. And
has anybody? But when no one has been released, and it's so clear throughout here that there was a problem with, it was a problem not just of form, but also of who was hired. That tells me your credibility, frankly, is a little weak. I apologize, but here, for example, I'm reading from your internal document. A large number of inspectors were hired who have unrealistic expectations and the wrong skill set or mindset to do the work of a regulatory inspector, who are located in geographic areas that do not make sense or align to the mission, who, for example, seek law enforcement authority as opposed to work, using uniforms as a symbol of identity and authority rather than a tool to be used. I mean, that suggests to me that it wasn't just tweaking, a little improvement of the bonding with the union, but there were people hired who were inappropriate to the position to which they were hired. I could give further examples of that. The fact that you tell me that, no, we haven't really released anybody, we've just reassigned them, tells me you haven't been serious about what you're doing.
Yeah. You know, I think we've come a long way in building the culture of the organization and building a regulatory compliance organization, and we have, you know, some very professional, extraordinarily talented folks throughout our team. They come from a variety of backgrounds.
Some, this is plural, some are simply unsuited for supervision, treating employees in an unfair, unprofessional, or disrespectful manner. Others are uninformed about their responsibilities as a supervisor to manage employee issues. This is your internal document. Yeah. And yet what I'm hearing from you is, no, we haven't really released anybody, but we're working on it. Yeah. Frankly, that doesn't help your credibility.
Sir, some of the thoughts behind that statement were that individuals were hired into positions that they weren't adequately trained and from a baseline resume review didn't have the background for.
I'm out of time.
What we have done is go through the process of training, go through the process of moving those individuals to more appropriate positions that are cast against their against their qualifications.
And so has anybody had a reduction in pay? Because another thing was an excess number of highly graded personnel are serving in positions that do not contribute to the mission at a level commensurate with their pay grades. Has anybody taken a decrease in pay?
That's where I say we're moving people to more appropriate positions. But let me ask David to comment.
And we have made a lot of progress over the past year. I mean, that report was put together about a year ago, and we have put into place a variety of things, including training for supervisors. We have.
If I'm a taxpayer and I see something that smacks of cronyism per your report, the obvious question is, am I getting more bang for my taxpayer buck? Has anybody taken a cut in pay?
We have people in positions for which they're more suited, and we have we have put into place a, an open and transparent
And
process.
we'll take that as a no, we're out of time. I apologize.
Gentleman is yielding back his time. I guess the big point is if you can't do the small things, how can the country, the localities, the taxpayers, the public interest groups expect us to do the big things? And that line of questioning, I think, just highlights that. The chair wants to announce that he wishes to recess this hearing so members and interested persons can go to the 9/11 service at the Capitol with no objection. Mr. Beers is excused from the first panel. Mr. Beers, will you commit to provide full and accurate responses to written questions within 10 days of their submission?
Yes, sir.
And that's a request from both sides. So when we return, we will have Mr. Wolf and Ms. Barrett continue answering some questions if that's okay with you all. The committee stands in recess until 11:30. More like 12. How about 11:45? I'd like to call the hearing back to order. If staff could get the doors, no one's back there to take care of those. Again, we want to thank you for your patience and for the, again, giving us an opportunity to join our colleagues out on the steps of the Capitol. It's always a memorable time and usually very short because on September 11th it was a short event in which we gathered. So I think those of us who were here remember that with a lot of emotions as Americans do. And that's why I think what we're doing here today is still important and relevant. So with that, I'd like to recognize myself for, which would be a second round of questions and for 5 minutes. Ms. Barrick, CBS recently reported on problems with the CFATS program. The report showed a video clip of the Undersecretary of the National Protection and Programs Directorate, during which he calls CFATS program a tremendous success to date. Would GAO characterize the program the same way?
No, no, Mr. Chairman, not based on the work we've done to date. I mean, I think what's going to dictate whether or not it's successful is whether it's able to execute its mission. And I think they're still in the early phases of positioning themselves to be able to do that.
And following up on your response, should they still be in the early stages?
You know, comparing them to other regulatory programs across DHS, I think it's certainly taking them longer to get CFATS up and running. For example, comparing them to the Coast Guard, who also had to set up a regulatory regime at the ports when the Maritime and Transportation Security Act was passed. The Coast Guard got it up and running probably in a year and a half, although the Coast Guard did have personnel in place and an infrastructure, so they were better equipped to get up to speed earlier. TSA may be a better comparison since that was a new organization and they were setting up a new regulatory regime. It took TSA, I think, several years looking across both their regulatory and voluntary programs, and they also had some challenges, but not to the degree that CFATS has had. I think part of this could also be contributed to the standards that inspectors are assessing against, and CFATS, it's performance-based, which they're broader, whereas at TSA, the standards tended to be more specific, and that could be in some respects easier to establish a framework to assess against those specific standards. So some differences, but looking across the department, it's taken CFATS longer to get up and running.
Well, it was last year when I had an inspector just come visit on, kind of do an open office hour type thing, and he was well-intentioned, wanted to do the right thing, but was really lacking any guidance. So I think they were going around visiting facilities, but really having no idea what they were checking for and why they were checking for, and it kind of saddened me just because he really wanted to do the right thing, but there was really a lack of guidance. And this was last year, last August, so not this past August. I understand that GO has placed DHS on its high-risk list due to management challenges facing the department. And we're talking about the whole Department of Homeland Security. To what extent have these management challenges had an impact on the NPBD's ability to manage the CFATS program?
You know, I think CFATS is an example of those management challenges that we talk about in the high-risk area. We placed DHS on the high-risk list in 2003 after it was created because we found that they didn't have the rigor and procedures and oversight over their core management functions, and this is acquisition management, financial management, information technology, and human capital management. And what we were finding is because of not having the discipline in these management areas, it was having a negative effect on DHS's ability to implement its mission. So there were a number of programs that weren't meeting performance expectations, cost more than what they were supposed to cost, were taking longer to field because of these management challenges. I think CFATS is an example of this. For example, in the human capital area, we've talked throughout the department about DHS's challenges in bringing people with the needed skills and abilities on board to fill critical positions. They've had challenges in doing that. In the information technology area, CFATS has an information technology tool to solicit input from the facilities to look at their site security plans and vulnerability assessments. The tool has some challenges which were identified in the internal memo, mainly that it provides a lot of data but not in a real user-friendly format to read. So that's an example of an IT challenge. I think the department as a whole has recognized these management problems. They have some good strategies in place to address them, but they're in the relatively early stages of doing that.
So DHS is in the high risk. CFAS is probably their number one problem of concern. I think it goes back to the issues. You can't get the small things right. How do people trust you to do the big things in this issue? So we appreciate your analysis. And then my final question, given the seriousness and multitude of problems with CFATS is facing, particularly with respect to conducting its mission, would it be viable to consider, quote unquote, standing down the program for some period of time so that these issues can be addressed before attempting to move forward with this regulatory mission? And put it in another way, it's like trying to build a car while you're racing the car.
Right.
Would it make, could we get a better return on investment and more timely process getting it right before it's deployed? Or you understand the question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's something DHS would have to consider, weighing that against the need to field a program to address existing security vulnerabilities. There is an example in DHS's history where they did just that. They were working to field a program called Secure Flight, which was a high priority program within the department that compared the matching of passenger information against terrorist watch lists for airline passengers. Air carriers used to have that function. The 9/11 Commission recommended that DHS take over that function from carriers. Well, DHS tried to field this program for several years. 5 years into it, they weren't able to field a successful program, and so they did just what you mentioned. They actually stood down the program. They went back and instilled some rigor in the acquisition that wasn't there before. They were making sure that they were preparing appropriate documentation, and they did that for a year, and then when they turned the switch on and moved forward, they ended up fielding a successful program. So even though there was a delay when they did stand down the program, ultimately they probably saved time in that they were able to address those problems they had, get the finish that, and then focus on implementing the program. So I think it is something worth thinking about.
Time, effort, energy, frustration, all the above, and I would agree. I think I'm going through the secure TSA thing now. It just popped up. I wasn't given much a warning, and all of a sudden I can go in a different lane. So it's pretty nice. Chairman now recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In June of this year, the House passed an appropriations bill for the Department of Homeland Security that cut funding for CFATS in half. Mr. Wolf, what impact would cutting your budget in half on the CPAS program, what impact would it have?
That proposed cut would have a pretty major impact on our ability to move the program forward at what's a really critical time for the program. we have made a great deal of progress in our action plan. We have, in essence, taken a bit of an operational pause over the past several months. We're now at the point where we've conducted the training, we've developed a streamlined site security plan review process. We have our inspectors out having recommenced authorization inspections. We've turned an important corner in the program, and a cut, as the House Appropriations Committee has proposed, would force some very, very difficult choices. We would have a limited ability to pursue needed improvements to the site security plan tool in the top screen and SVA tool, something we're moving forward with in partnership with our industry stakeholders. We would have limited ability to continue implementing the action plan. We've made considerable amount of progress in that implementation process, having completed 67 of the 95 action items. It would essentially cut the legs out from under us when we have turned an important corner, when we do expect and anticipate and have already begun to see a heightened pace of site security plan authorizations, approvals, and facility inspections.
Well, and I'm sure you understand the frustration after 6 years and funding, and that's frustration, but we're seeing some improvement now, and to cut the funding and still expect results is just not going to happen. Yeah. And so I don't know what the continuing resolution we'll vote on this week has for the 6 months, but I would hope it would be something that would give you the resources to do your job. Mr. Wolf, the site security plan process is a key link to your ability to effectively review and approve plans. Have you made progress with improving this vital tool so that the covered facilities have clear instruction on information DHS needs?
Yeah, we have, in fact. We, over the past several months, having learned many lessons ourselves as we went through the site security plan reviews at our headquarters, have been out kind of piggybacking on events that industry associations have been holding across the country to get the word out to facilities about how they can provide the detail that will enable us to get more efficiently and effectively through the review of the site security plans and get to authorization and approval in a more streamlined fashion. At the same time, we're kicking off the SSP tool focus groups, working groups with industry to continue to try to improve that tool to make it more user-friendly both to the facilities and to our reviewers, and also continuing to work with industry on the alternative security program templates.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing in the regulated community because, again, I have huge numbers of those in our district. And we have a particular group that I work with a lot, East Harris County manufacturers, made up of our refiners, chemical plants, service companies. And that's one of the issues when I talk to them, that they want to be part of the solution instead of just being told what to do. And sometimes the federal government's known for giving instructions that doesn't work on the ground. Yeah. And so I'm glad you're bringing them in. Ms. Barrick, the GAO has done extensive work on the need for strong security at chemical facilities going back to as far as 2003. Can you describe the risk posed by these facilities?
There is a risk posed by these facilities, the details of which are classified. We will be happy to come up and brief you and your staff separately on that, but there is a risk according to DHS's threat assessment.
Oh, I have no doubt that there's a risk. In fact, I have companies that produce ammonia, that we ship ammonia, all sorts of volatile chemicals. That's just the nature of our district. It is important to have an effective government program, though, that ensures chemical facilities are protected from a terrorist attack. Is that correct?
Yeah, according to DHS's threat assessments, they have identified a need for such a program.
And, there are things that are happening in the last 6 years, even though the oversight may not be there or what we need, because I know both through the FBI, working with local law enforcement, and our plant security, I've seen them there. Our local special agent in charge has told me they've been on every plant site, in fact, probably by now a number of times, to be able to work with the folks who actually work there and produce these products that our country needs. Mr. Chairman, I know I'm over time, so thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Cassidy, for 5 minutes.
Yeah, Mr. Wolf,
Mr. Cassidy, will you turn that? Thank you.
I'm a physician. I know if you continue to have the same inputs, you should expect the same output. So all my questions go back to that initial report as to the inputs of your process, which obviously have been lacking. And by the way, when you haven't laid off anybody, and yet we have an internal report showing that some of the people are sitting at their desks doing nothing, but you continue to maintain you need the same amount of money, I'm wondering why we're giving you any. Because frankly, the public trust is not being met by your actions. That's just my perspective, and as a counterpoint to what Mr. Green said. Ms. Barrick, in the internal report it says that the database KIMS was the wrong database. It does appear the database can be modified to meet needs, but requires a substantial amount of redefining requirements, reworking protocols, codes, etc. Calling into question the funding spent to date, going back to funding. Is the database now adequate?
It is not, according to the office and based on the work we've done to date, in that it does provide some value because it's a tool to collect the needed information for CFATs to assess. However, it's not very user-friendly. Outputs are oftentimes data dumps that are difficult to sift through, especially when you're looking at something as complex as what CFATs is looking at. So there are identified challenges that CFATs has identified themselves and are working to try to address, but it's going to take time and money to, I think, make those revisions to the system.
Okay, time and money to make that revision, and yet somehow we're going to be back on track certifying plants. And I say not this to be mean, but I'm supposed to be providing oversight for the American taxpayer who, if she knew what was going on, would just be furious. Ms. Barrick, it said in the internal report that ISCD does not have an established records management system to document development and maintenance of necessary historical documentation related to programs owned by the division. Has that now been corrected?
I don't know if that has been a closed action item or not. I believe it's in progress. Maybe Mr. Wolf has the current status.
Yeah, it is in progress, and we are keeping records very, very extensively and thoroughly. It's a high priority and something we take very seriously, as the remainder of the action items as well, on which we've made a significant amount.
So yes or no, do you have an established records management system now?
We do.
Okay.
If I can mention, Mr. Cassidy, GAO has ongoing work looking in more detail at CFAT's ability to meet its mission. We'll be reporting on those results early next year, including looking at the records retention issue.
Okay, that would be great. Budget. Our lack of focus and vision has resulted in problems how we spend our money, how we are managing these funds. For example, buying first responder equipment such as hazmat suits, when as a regulatory entity we do not have a first responder role. Ms. Barrick, has that been corrected?
I do not know, Mr. Cassidy.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes, it absolutely has. In the early days of the program, there were course corrections. There was some thought, and this was before my time, that chemical security inspectors would have a response role. As the program evolved and as it became clear that they would not, that equipment was repurposed within the department.
Are we still paying more than $20,000 per year for professional memberships in ASIS that are unnecessary, et cetera?
We're not paying for those memberships.
And now it says ISCD lacks, again, internal document, lacks a system for tracking the usage of consumable supplies, which creates an environment for fraud, waste, and abuse to exist. Has that, Ms. Barrick, now been established?
I'm sorry, I don't know the current status of that item.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes, we are tracking those supplies.
Okay. I could go on, but I think we're making the point. There seems to be substantial amounts of really critical things which have to be addressed, and on an ongoing basis, we're keeping people employed who, again, your internal documentation suggests are the inappropriate person for their roles. Build a case why we should give you more money.
Well, as I've said, we have made a significant amount of progress, I think, with regard to...
Now, I'm a physician, and I teach. So when a medical student, and I say this not to be abusive, and I apologize if I come across this way, but if somebody tells me significant is one of those loosey-goosey words that may or may not have significance. It's certainly you've moved the ball from here to there, but if this is the threshold at which you can actually accomplish a mission, where are you relative to getting to the threshold where you can actually accomplish your mission? Sure, you may have made significant progress, but you may have this incredible gap between where you are now and where you need to, where the threshold at which you can actually accomplish your mission. Actually, Ms. Barrick, where would you guess they are?
I think they're in their early stages. They're still setting up a framework to position themselves.
Are we
to accomplish
10% of the way there, 100%, 50%, 60%?
If I had to put a guess, educated guess percentage, maybe 25%.
And can you give us a time frame in terms of years at which they will reach the threshold of being able to accomplish their mission?
All the actions underway have different timelines. We have been told that CFATS is estimating it could take up to 3 years to complete compliance inspections once they review the site security plans.
But we don't even have a database yet in which can be easily used in order to support that initial site. So the 3 years is after the threshold is met.
The 3 years from today is the estimate that they provided us. And again, we're going to continue to review this as a part of our ongoing work. And I think early next year we'll be positioned to provide you details on where we think they are in terms of this continuum of progress.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Wolf, you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to. We are, I believe, accomplishing our mission. The CFATS program has accomplished a great deal over the course of its existence. The 2,700 facilities that have removed or reduced their chemicals of interest, the 7,800 security vulnerability assessments that have been completed and reviewed by our staff, the more than 3,000 compliance assistance visits, and other outreach visits that our inspectors have conducted have laid important groundwork. We are at the point where we are seeing a heightened pace of reviews of site security plans. Within the last week, we have authorized, myself along with Assistant Secretary Durkovich, have authorized 10 additional plans and approved our first 2 site security plans. We're going to be moving this program forward, and I'm very pleased to say that I have had, as have the rest of our team in ISCD, tremendous amount of support within the organization. There's a tremendous amount of commitment for getting this job done. We are accomplishing the mission. In terms of percentages, we put into place that corrective action plan last fall. We're 70% done with that. Not that we're ever going to be completely done. We're going to continue forward. I'm sorry, sir.
I appreciate your passion. Defending the program. You can understand why my colleague has frustration, and we all know, and we would all want to move this together. In talking with my ranking member, 2 things. He wants to make sure we put on record that obviously our oversight's not going to end, so we'll just keep monitoring this. And I think for both of us, for the defense of the program, and for the giving due preference and diligence to our taxpayers, I think it's the right course of action to make sure that we finish this and we have a program that we can defend publicly. Also, without objection, I'd like to pose one other question, just because we were talking about budget. The President's supposed to lay out, hopefully, sequestration issues Friday. Sequestration, 50% of that comes out of defense and Homeland Security, national defense issues. Have you all heard, and I know you've got a small program on Homeland Security, but I would venture to say that whatever budget that the House has proposed that might address funding, sequestration might do even more. Have you guys even talked about what effects sequestration might happen to the CFATS program?
I have not been part of those discussions.
And we await the President's disclosing what he may or may not do. Seeing no other members asking for time, we'd like to thank you for coming back or making sure that we could get the second round. It was very important for all of us. And we'd like to dismiss you and impanel the second panel. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
don't believe I've ever actually met you in person, but you're from Dow. So yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. You know, Pam Butcher is our president.
We're going to start with the second panel as soon as the door gets closed. Thank you. And we also want to thank you all for coming. The way I operate is I'm going to introduce you all like right off the bat, and then we'll go for 5-minute opening statements. We also ask unanimous consent that all members of the subcommittee have 5 days to forward questions to you all too, without objection, so ordered. On the second panel, we have Mr. Timothy Scott, Chief Security Officer of Dow Chemical Company. We also have Mr. Matthew Leary, Corporate EHS&S Manager. I guess I'll ask that. Pilot Chemical Company. We have Miss Anna Fenley, United Steelworkers, Health, Safety, and Environment Department, and Mr. Paul Oram on his own behalf. So with that, we appreciate you attending. You all have 5 minutes for an opening statement. Your full statement will be submitted for the record. I did review them, scanned them all last night, and so I appreciate the efforts you made on that behalf. And with that, we'll begin with Mr. Scott for 5 minutes.
Chairman Shimkus, Ranking Member Green, and members of the subcommittee, my name is Tim Scott, and I'm the Chief Security Officer for the Dow Chemical Company. I'm speaking today on behalf of Dow and the American Chemistry Council, and I'll focus on 4 points. First, the chemical industry and DHS have a common goal of improving the security profile of the chemical sector, reducing the risk of attack or the use of chemicals as a weapon, and minimizing the impact of the potential threats on our country. Second, the chemical industry and DHS have made some progress using both voluntary industry initiatives and collaborative efforts to clarify and meet performance standards. Third, the concerns associated with the implementation of the chemical facilities anti-terrorism standards and internal DHS management issues are real. It's promising to hear that improvements are being made in both areas. In spite of these distractions, industry has made progress. And lastly, we need to build on this progress to achieve an efficient, integrated, and sustainable security plan for the chemical industry and our country. It's time to move on and, in fact, accelerate our efforts. The CFATS concept is fundamentally sound. DHS established risk-based performance standard, flexibility for the regulated companies to apply customized security solutions for each unique site and situation, and DHS final approval and review for compliance. That is the goal, to set expectations, meet those standards, and by doing so, reduce the vulnerability and risk of our chemical sector. Too often we fixate on the methods used to achieve the goal instead of the goal itself. No one method addresses every site or every situation, but we are making progress. The concept of alternative security plans offer an excellent opportunity for a thorough but expeditious review and approval process of the site security plans at many CFATS regulated facilities, especially those in the lower tiered sites and companies that have multiple regulated sites. DHS recently completed a pilot test of an ACC-developed alternative security plan, and it proved to be a worthwhile exercise for both industry and DHS, an excellent example of an open and collaborative effort to improve and expedite the process. Members of the ACC implemented the Responsible Care Security Code in 2002, and over the past decade, ACC members have spent nearly $10 billion on security enhancements. The code is a requirement for membership and is included in independent third-party audits of the responsible care management system. Recognition of the value of such voluntary industry initiatives is being considered as another possible means of fast-tracking reviews of site security plans. The next generation of the DHS Site Security Plan tool is being developed and will be both easier and more efficient for industry and a more valuable and usable source of information for DHS. Progress has been made, but there are still some hurdles to overcome. Personnel surety is critical to any security program, and most companies had background checks and programs in place well before the creation of DHS. Screening against the terrorist database is a welcome addition to the performance standards and is, as it should be, a government responsibility. CFATS is closing this gap, but this is an area where we can use your help. By design, CFATS allows the flexibility to address each performance standard using the method best suited to each particular site and situation. The Personnel Surety Program and performance standards should be no exception. There are many readily available government-approved options that would fully comply with this standard, and there is no valid reason to limit the options. In the case of the Personnel Surety Standard, however, DHS management has not demonstrated the flexibility that is integral to and authorized by CFATS. Also in the area of the terrorist database screening, there is one concept in which all security managers agree. We should know that a person can pass the screening before we issue an entry card and let a potential threat in the gate. And we should keep any potential threat out of the site. That's a pretty basic security concept, but it is not clear that DHS management is in agreement with this important point, and that is a cause for significant concern. There is definitely room for improvement in the implementation of the Chemical Facilities Anti-Terrorism Standards, but the necessary corrections can be made and success can be achieved. Success demands constancy of purpose, commitment, and collaboration. ACC member companies are committed. We should not return to square one with DHS or change course in midstream. We should strengthen collaboration and increase the pace to build an efficient, integrated, and sustainable chemical security process for our country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to recognize Mr. Leary for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Shimkus, Ranking Member Green, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Matt Leary, and I am both Corporate Security Officer as well as the Environment, Health, and Safety Manager for Pilot Chemical Company in Cincinnati, Ohio. I am pleased to provide this testimony on behalf of the Society of Chemical Manufacturers and Affiliates regarding how the Department of Homeland Security has been implementing the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards and what that has meant for Pilot's 2 covered facilities. Pilot Chemical is a small privately held company celebrating its 60th anniversary on the 19th of this month. We specialize in alkylation, sulfonation, and sulfation, which are used to manufacture detergents. We have only 200 employees. We have 4 facilities, 2 of which are subject to CFATS. Maintaining the security of our facilities has always been a priority for SOCMA members like Pilot. After the tragic events of 9/11, which occurred 11 years ago today, SOCMA members did not wait for new government regulations before researching, investing in, and implementing additional and far-reaching facility security measures to address these new threats. However, there were no uniform federal standards for measuring and implementing these security improvements across industry. CFATS standardized that process. Definitively, DHS's Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards work. DHS listened to the private sector in developing a regulatory framework that is risk-based and preserves the ability for security professionals to make investments in measures that suit their specific facilities, but that also provides robust performance standards and imposes strict penalties for noncompliance. But that does not mean that the CFATS experience has been easy for regulated companies, especially small ones like Pilot. In several respects, the manner in which DHS has implemented the regulations has imposed substantial uncertainties and costs on companies. I recognize that DHS has been building out the program at the very same time it has been implementing it. Nonetheless, I am confident that DHS could have substantially reduced these uncertainties and costs if they had implemented the program more quickly and confidently. They still could. An ongoing challenge for Pilot has been the unwillingness of DHS to give us useful guidance on how to comply with the risk-based performance standards that are the heart of CFATS. DHS staff say they cannot give us clear guidance because the CFATS statute prohibits DHS from requiring facilities to implement specific security measures. That is ridiculous, however. The statute's prohibition on requiring particular security measures doesn't prevent DHS staff from saying security measure X is one way to meet RBPS Y at tier level Z. It is not the only way, and we are certainly open to discussing other ways. If DHS staff were willing to offer non-exclusive safe harbors to those seeking feedback, companies like Pilot that are looking for clear compliance guidelines would be able to obtain it. The other reason we believe DHS has been unwilling to give clear guidance is described on page 10 of the Anderson-Wolf memo, which says, there exists within the cadre of SSP reviewers a reluctance to recommend good enough SSPs for authorization or conditional authorization out of fear that the leadership has a zero-tolerance philosophy towards mistakes and out of a lack of clarity regarding expectations. DHS needs to make clear to staff that they are expected to use their judgment to make decisions and that management will not punish them for doing so. Another issue of concern to Pilot has been DHS's misguided personal surety proposal. Last year, DHS announced its intent to establish a web-based application that would require facility owners and operators to submit personally identifying information about current and prospective employees, as well as contractor and visitor personnel seeking access to a plant. Our industry has expressed serious reservations about the logistical nightmares that this proposal could lead to, given the heavy presence of contractors at chemical sites, especially during plant-wide maintenance turnarounds. DHS has been open to discussing alternative approaches, and the industry has proposed both interim and long-term alternatives that could involve reliance on existing federal vetting programs, mechanisms by which contractor and visitor employees could submit information regarding their own employees, and ultimately a universal federal security credential that would supersede all others. Many smaller companies like Pilot would benefit from leveraging existing processes for vetting individuals that we feel meet the intent of the standards. DHS's prior proposal would unnecessarily limit the number of options open to regulated facilities for complying with RBPS 12. Resolving this challenge expeditiously would free up ISCD resources to focus on the more pressing task of approving SSPs and initiating compliance inspections. As I have testified today, the CFATS framework is sound, but DHS's implementation has been flawed. We have seen progress made by the Department under the recent management of Deputy Undersecretary Suzanne Spalding and ISCD Director David Wolf. To help ensure further progress is made, however, DHS must not drift away from the spirit of the public-private partnership on chemical security that it has so often hailed as a keystone of the CFATS program. I appreciate this opportunity to testify before you today and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Chair now recognizes Ms. Fenley for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Shimkus, Ranking Member Green, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I represent the Health, Safety, and Environment Department for the United Steel, Paper and Forestry, Rubber, Manufacturing, Energy, Allied Industrial, and Service Workers International Union, USW for short. We represent 850,000 workers in the sectors I just mentioned and many others, including the majority of unionized workers in the chemical industry and hundreds of thousands of men and women whose workplaces use and store large quantities of industrial chemicals. I'm here today on the 11th anniversary of the September 11th attacks to talk about the critical and unfulfilled need for comprehensive chemical security protections for workers and citizens. There were promises and hopes that CFATS would protect American citizens when it was enacted as a temporary measure before a more comprehensive program could be passed. And some security measures have been implemented under CFATS. But CFATS is not and never will be the comprehensive program that we need to protect against an unforeseen terrorist attack. Most notable for our members are several gaps in CFATS jurisdiction that leave millions of Americans and American infrastructure at risk. CFATS exempts thousands of water treatment facilities containing poisonous chlorine gas and other chemicals. It also exempts port facilities on navigable waters, which are covered by the Maritime Transportation Security Act. Many of those port facilities are oil refineries where our USW members work in the vicinity of small towns and major U.S. cities like Houston, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Other facilities that fall outside of CFATS are those under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Coast Guard, the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. CFATS also does not cover chemicals shipped or stored outside the fence line in nearby rail yards or elsewhere that may have little or no security measures. It does not prohibit the shifting of these risks from one location to another. I've seen pictures and gotten accounts from our members of rail cars full of hazardous chemicals parked for days outside the fence line within yards of a busy road near homes and other businesses. Employers may engage in this form of risk shifting to be taken off the list of high-risk facilities, or risk shifting could be an established practice occurring for years because workers and management simply do not recognize the hazard and the potential for a criminal act. Under CFATS, there is no way of knowing if and how these risks are being shifted. Additionally, CFATS explicitly prohibits the requirement of any particular security measure, such as safer chemical processes. My colleagues and I work with employers every day. Many take safety measures that go above and beyond, but there are always some that will only do the minimum required by law, and as we all know, some who won't even do that. Some companies have shifted to safer processes or reduced their inventory of hazardous chemicals. These facilities include where USW members make paper, aluminum, glass, and other products, but many companies will never even look at innovating without a legal requirement to do so. Other important Another important deficiency of CFATS is the lack of a meaningful role for workers in chemical security. Workers who operate and maintain facilities know the most about what needs to be done to reduce vulnerability and protect against a terrorist attack. However, under CFATS, background checks done by employers or third parties may be used against workers or be full of inaccuracies due to errors in reporting. CFATS also is lacking in its provisions for an appropriate appeal process when errors made in background checks improperly exclude workers. Employer background checks allow for a risk of releasing personal information and may also result in duplication of effort when many workers at high-risk sites already must acquire a Transportation Worker Identification Credential, TWIC, issued by the TSA, which is part of DHS but separate from the CFATS office. TWIC requires background checks and TSA safeguards personal information. Workers across this country, those who would be hurt first and worst during an attack, need stronger comprehensive chemical security legislation that is effectively implemented. Congress can no longer simply oversee implementation of a measure that was intended as temporary. Action is needed to legislate a comprehensive chemical security program that addresses the gaps in CFATS that leave millions of American workers and their families at risk. You, Mr. Chairman, and your committee could take action to make these improvements. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Oram, you're recognized. Is that Oram? You're recognized for 5 minutes. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Oram. I'm pleased to represent the views today important to the Blue-Green Chemical Security Coalition, as well as findings from research conducted for the Center for American Progress and others. I plan to make 3 main points. 1, the chemical security problem is well known. 2, the current program, CFATS, won't, in my view, fix the problem. And 3, Congress should pass comprehensive chemical security legislation. The chemical security problem is well known. More than 24 government agencies and others have warned that industrial chemicals could be intentionally or inadvertently released to cause harm. Many of these resources are listed in my testimony, and for brevity, I won't repeat them. 2, the current temporary chemical facility anti-terrorism standards won't fix the problem. The standards lack basic elements of an effective program. CFATS exempts drinking water facilities, it exempts wastewater facilities, it exempts many major refineries and terminals and chemical manufacturers that happen to be on navigable waters. It excludes knowledgeable employees and their representatives from security planning. It doesn't allow DHS to require companies to fix security problems, specific security problems on the ground. It lacks clear deadlines for completion and approval of assessments and plans. It lacks basic government accountability measures such as regular progress reports. It doesn't secure chemical supply chains. In my view, it perpetuates uncertainty. And very importantly, it neglects technological changes that can make chemical facilities less attractive targets. These flaws are in the law. They're all found in the appropriations rider that created CFATS as a temporary program. Congress should authorize a comprehensive chemical security program. The last Congress, about 3 years ago, did so after the House passed after a lengthy consultation with stakeholders in 4 congressional committees. This bill would have closed the greatest loopholes while seamlessly incorporating CFATS. It's the responsibility of Congress to authorize a comprehensive program. In addition, Congress should support, not hinder, existing authority of the U.S. EPA to promote safer technologies under the General Duty Clause of the Clean Air Act, and likewise the authority of DHS to promote intrinsically more secure technologies as a security measure under CFATS. While Congress should close all the chemical security loopholes, I'd like to elaborate on 2 current deficiencies. First, government accountability. If we've spent $500 million on chemical security, it's important for the public to know what the effort is producing. The comprehensive program passed in 2009 included government accountability provisions, namely regular public progress reports to Congress. The reports were to summarize how facilities were complying and lay out the basic scope of the program, how many facilities, how many plans, how many approved, and so forth. Had these provisions been included in CFATS, the first report to Congress would have been due some 5 years ago, and many challenges would have come to light systematically rather than as a result of leaked internal memoranda. In my opinion, the program will inevitably lack public credibility if it doesn't require a complete public accounting of facilities and scope and progress. An effective program should also help companies identify and remove avoidable chemical hazards. Under CFATS, DHS has not developed the removal of unnecessary chemical targets as a security measure. We know that some 1,600 or more facilities have reportedly removed chemicals of concern, and others have dropped below reporting thresholds. While we lack basic public information about these changes, the numbers do suggest that much more than this could be done with a structured program. Each facility that tiers out of the program is a facility that DHS does not have to oversee. Removing unnecessary targets should be one of the tools in the chemical security toolbox. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify. Please let me know any questions or ways that I or my colleagues can be helpful to the committee.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask unanimous consent that Mr. Pompeo can sit in. I know there may be another from your side joining us. And then as per tradition, if members of the subcommittee are done asking their questions, then we'll go to other members from the full committee who are joining us. So with that, I recognize myself for 5 minutes, and my questions are going to start with Mr. Scott. It's my view that CFAT's officials are trying to operate a regulatory program like a police program. This brings me to concerns with the personal surety program, which has been addressed a couple times today already. As I understand it, the terrorist screening database is operated by the Federal Bureau of Investigations, not DHS. Under another DHS program, the Marine Transportation Security Act, we do a lot of acronyms, so I like to read these out. If someone with a TWIC card gets a hit on the terrorist screening database, the TWIC is automatically deactivated and the facility notified. Minimum DHS interference in that process. Under CFATS, the program seems to insist that all information be passed through them to the FBI, but that the Infrastructure Security Compliance Division cannot let a facility know if a terrorist is working in their plant. Do you agree with me that DHS is not trying to operate CFATS like it was intended by Congress, but more like a policing and response program?
Yes, sir. They seem to be gathering information and holding information within DHS instead of sharing in a partnership as we started out. So the TWIC program and the background check program, personal surety is one example of that, where we would be required to submit information to DHS and really never get an answer back. Especially concerning is we don't get an answer back if they do have somebody that's a hit in the terrorist database. We're going to have them, if they don't tell us, we still have a potential terrorist working in our plants, and that's absolutely crazy.
And it's the first panel, as I was talking to Undersecretary Beers, and how can you give the approval or the wink and nod that a facility has been approved when they really haven't established the personal surety program in an operation? I would think that would be the number one concern. If DHS has no response function, is there a reason why the facility cannot communicate directly with the FBI?
No, there's absolutely no reason. In fact, most facilities are going to communicate with their local Joint Terrorism Task Force and the FBI and the local law enforcement. I mean, that's the response agencies for a situation that does occur at your site.
Has your experience under the MTSA, which is the Marine Transportation Security Act, led you to believe it is doable to prevent known terrorists from wandering around a land-based plant?
Several of our larger sites are covered under the Marine Maritime Transportation Security Act.
Right.
And we have a very good relationship, and the Coast Guard is a very strong organization, both on the response side and the enforcement side, and have worked with us very closely because our MTSA sites have the same security upgrades and same security programs as all of our CFATS covered sites.
Why do you believe strongly that, as some of the panelists do not, that EPA should not be the chemical security agency for the federal government?
Well, the general duty clause was, it came to us under the Clean Air Act, is specifically designed for environmental protection and does a very good job. Well, EPA does a very good job in that respect. They do not have a lot of expertise in site security types of programs, and we don't really need to start over with a new agency to go back to square one and try to do this again.
Thank you. Let me turn to Mr. Leary now, because Dow, monstrous big, Mr. Leary, small, but hopefully profitable. You testified that you have limited capital to invest in needs across your plant, not just CFATS-related ones. So what percentage of your capital is being tied up by the poor implementation of the CFATS program?
Chairman, I can't really speak to the corporation, but I can, as an example, talk to you about my department's budgetary concerns. And at least in what I've just submitted, our fiscal year runs September. And I think security accounted for over 100% of the budget as compared to everything else that we're tasked to do.
How do we assure that the real financial needs of your security professionals are taken seriously within the context of CFATS implementation?
Chairman, I can only speak for Pilot in this respect, and I'm very proud to report to the subcommittee that I've been given more than enough support to do so. And at least from a Pilot perspective, there's been no issues whatsoever in terms of getting support to go ahead and do what we have to do under the standard.
Thank you. I have 13 seconds left. I'll now yield back my time and turn to my ranking member, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes.
Again, thank you for being here and patient today. Were you here during the first panel? Mm-hmm. The question for all of you is that, including U.S. Steelworkers, and the CFATS Personnel Surety Program proposal was recently rescinded and received much criticism from industry and unions. Can you explain what the criticism was, and how did DHS respond to your concerns?
I'll be glad to address that a little bit. The concern is the burden on industry, and you have many sites that mentioned earlier have a contractor base that travels along the Gulf Coast, for example, during all the shutdowns, and you may have thousands of new employees coming in on a daily basis for a shutdown, and they may show up at the Dow Chemical Company today, and we would have to submit 1,000 names, and they may show up tomorrow at one of our neighboring companies, and they'll have to submit the same 1,000 names. It's a very burdensome process, and they don't recognize any easy solutions that are out there, like a TWIC card from MTSA.
Well, and that's just, I have a Dow facility in my district, not your largest, obviously not Freeport, but I assume the contractors have their TWIC cards.
Most contractors on the Gulf Coast have a TWIC card, yes, because they travel between sites.
Yeah. Any other response to that? Was the steelworkers brought in? I'm glad, you know, the industry was a small chemical producer. I have to admit, I don't have many small plants in our area. We have big plants. But were the small plant owners also brought in along with steelworkers?
Yeah, I will. At the recent security summit put on by SOCMA and I believe co-sponsored by DHS, actually Pilot had an opportunity to sit in on a roundtable with DHS regarding just this topic. And I was surprisingly pleased that we were actually asked our opinion. And so I do believe at least they're concerned about our opinions.
To my knowledge, we were not brought in, but we're very concerned about the deference to industry as well, and the lack of an appeals process if there's an error.
You know, it seemed like the testimony from our previous panel, though, said that they were working with the employee groups. Did I mishear that from the earlier panel? That's what I'm concerned about. And believe me, we want everybody at the table, and you know, whether it be the industry, small or large, but also the employees involved there. Maybe that opening went because they announced that they were going to deal with using the TWIC type application, which I know I have lots of steel workers. I have 4 of my 5 refineries, and a number of chemical plants are organized by the steel workers. And we had, a few years ago, we had problem solving because some of my constituents were denied their TWIC card, but then we would find out it was a mistake, and we would work with them on that. And I know with our renewal coming up now, it's going to be a problem, but we understand the problem we have. We don't want to reinvent it with another type of surety, and that's what worries me. It ought to base it on whether you're, and Dow has, at least in my area, they're all waterside, both Freeport and the one on the Houston Ship Channel. But I know you have plants that are not. And is Pilot covered by it in Cincinnati?
No, sir.
The TWIC card?
No, sir. It is not. Actually, our knowledge of the TWIC beyond these proceedings and our involvement with SOCM is somewhat minimal.
Okay. Well, we will continue to encourage them to bring everybody to the table. In questions for anyone else on the panel, what would you like to see DHS do to help achieve a more smooth implementation of the CFATS program? One of the things we've all recognized, there has to be some continuity and real reauthorization. And we haven't seen that, and I don't think we'll see that this Congress. But the year-to-year is an issue. But we also need to make sure, because my complaint is that the year-to-year, a lot of industries don't want to spend, they want to make sure what they're doing is going to be compliant with whatever DHS comes out with. Is that an issue that y'all dealt with within your companies?
From a pilot perspective, that's one of the biggest issues, actually. I could easily recount for much longer than allowed discussions with our finance director regarding the difficulties in budgeting for securing our facilities. We're very much afraid that we will be looking at an SSP approval and immediately have to expend thousands of dollars.
Okay. I only have a couple seconds. Mr. Scott, one of the concerns I have, because literally Dow's facilities back to back in my area along with a lot of other ones, and the testimony I've read shows that, is there an issue with industry taking chemicals that are produced in our plants and leaving it at unsecured facilities off plant site? You know, that bothers me, because again, I would see, you know, in our district that. And I haven't had any complaints about it. I know that's what Ms. Finley's testimony that's submitted included. And that's a security issue, whether it's made at ABC or Dow or ExxonMobil or anybody else, that some volatile chemicals are not in a secure facility, including a rail yard that has protections off-site.
So we've put the same restrictions, the same requirements on our shippers and on the people that, and I'm talking about Dow Chemical now, but yeah. But in general, the ACC member companies, as part of the Responsible Care Code, security is from the production site to the delivery to the customer. So we have a strong security program in place. And Dow in particular, we've submitted our site security plans to the DHS Safety Act office and had the site security plans approved, and our transportation distribution security plans also have certification under the DHS Safety Act office, which is kind of the good housekeeping seal of approval. So that whole chain of events takes a significant amount of security. So I think ACC member companies certainly take that into consideration under the Responsible Care Code.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from the state of Kansas, Mr. Pompeo, for 5 minutes. Welcome to the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Green, for allowing me to participate today. Appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate that, too. Look, Mr. Scott, I've got two questions for you that I wanted to come here today and speak about. The first is, in your written testimony, you talked about some of the problems in DHS's program, but you were very clear that the program's fundamentally sound, it's risk-based, it's focused on the right set of priorities, so DHS in large measure has it right. And there's things we can improve on and tweak, but it's largely got it right. There are some folks who disagree with that. Former EPA Administrator Christy Whitman said that EPA should be the primary agency in charge of chemical security. Greenpeace has said that EPA already has the power under the General Duty Clause in their view. There have been folks at EPA who have suggested that as well. As someone who's watched EPA in other places do real harm to potential tens and tens of thousands of jobs across America, that causes great concern to me. I've introduced legislation that clarifies what I think is already pretty clear regarding the General Duty Clause. It would require EPA to complete a rulemaking process before finding any facilities in violation of the General Duty Clause, and it would clarify that EPA's jurisdiction by prohibiting it from regulating chemical security through Section 112R1, the General Duty Clause. What is your view, Mr. Scott, on the recent calls by the environmental community to try and use the Clean Air Act to regulate chemical security when we already have this enormous apparatus in place?
Well, first, we think your legislation is a step in the right direction to clarify roles and responsibilities. As I mentioned earlier, EPA and the General Duty Clause came under the Clean Air Act, and EPA is very strong on environmental protection, not as strong in site security, physical security, transportation security, all the things that come into the supply chain around the chemical industry. So that's not their area of expertise, and that's exactly the reason why chemical security was put under the Department of Homeland Security, focused on security and all things in addition to chemical security. So the expertise and the foundation for the CFATS program lies with DHS, not with EPA. So I don't think we should muddy the waters, change in midstream, or even take one step back. We need to move forward with DHS.
Right. Do you think there's also, I mean, some risk when you get two agencies into it's contradictory, they present competing demands on entities, and all of a sudden we're in a worse place than we are even today with the challenges DHS is facing? Do you think there's some risk of that as well?
I think if we're going to put an effort to combine some things, it certainly shouldn't be with DHS and EPA. I would look to continue the harmonization with MTSA and CFATS, Coast Guard, and DHS. A lot of the facilities are very similar. A lot of the facilities are already covered by one or the other, or sometimes both. And I think they can be harmonized extremely well. Dow has built our security programs, whether it's a CFAT site or an MTSA site. We put security in place at the same level. I think that's the direction we should go if we're going to harmonize.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Your testimony also strongly supported the use of alternative security programs in CFATS by DHS. How broadly do you think the ASBs should be applied under CFATS? That is, it by facility or by sector? Do you have a view? Does Dow have a view on that?
Well, it depends. Again, it depends on the site, but you could certainly put it. You could expand an alternative security plan to companies that put similar security programs in place throughout all the regulated sites. So the alternative security plan, the only intent is to give DHS all the information they need to make a decision, improve the security of the site, and make it easier on the submission of the information to DHS. That's the goal of an alternative security plan.
I appreciate that. Last question. Do you think that the ASP provides any less protection for a facility than if the facility were to go through the entire CFATS compliance regime, or do you think it achieves the same objective?
It's the same objective. It's just a different way to submit the site's plan, and it's a more expeditious way to submit the site's plan. So there's no difference in the end result. It's either approved or it's not approved, and the security upgrades are the same.
Great, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. The ranking member has asked for unanimous consent to ask one additional question. Mr. Pompeo, you may want to stay around, listen to the answer. And without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
I would just like the panel, if you would give us an opinion. We haven't had a hearing on Mr. Pompeo's bill. I have some concern, but would y'all have any opinion on it? I know it's not on the list. Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
We'll go right to left this time.
Recall that EPA is the lead agency for security at water and wastewater facilities, which are CFATS exempt, but also more generally for chemical facilities. People in communities don't necessarily make much of a distinction whether it was inadvertent or deliberate if a gas cloud comes to where they are. When EPA acts to reduce catastrophic hazard potentials under its authorities, it has the secondary benefit of removing terrorist targets. So it's not necessarily so that EPA is acting as a security agency, but it may yet have security benefits.
I would agree with Mr. Oram. For workers at these sites, the potential for a terrorist attack and the potential for an accidental release, they would have the same effect. And if EPA can also work to reduce the presence and the quantities of hazardous chemicals on these sites, we're incredibly supportive of that.
SOCMA most certainly supports the bill as intended, and I really can't, I think Mr. Scott said it all in regards to our feelings as well.
No disagreement as far as the routine operation of the plant. We don't want an accidental release. We don't want an attack that causes a release. EPA takes care of the first part, and we do run our plant safely and securely and within EPA guidelines for routine operations. I think we need to focus on security to really improve the overall security of the sector coming from DHS.
Some concern about having two federal agencies dealing with it because we have enough trouble now with DHS doing their job. And, but you know, EPA does have statutory authority already on certain things. And, but I would hope our federal agencies would work together. Instead of you having to jump through two hoops, you at least know that these agencies are on the same page.
With that, and I would just weigh in and saying obviously I don't think the general duty clause has relevance in plant security issues. So with that, we appreciate the testimony and the second panel coming, and this hearing is now, all members of the subcommittee have 5 days to submit opening statements, have 10 days to submit written questions. One letter from the American Fuels and Petrochemical Manufacturers inserted into the record without objection. No objection. So ordered. The hearing